I don't even really know where to start with this story, but I think the best way is to say that everything began when I was still a kid and became obsessed with paranormal stuff. That obsession led me to these mountains, and what started as a search for the dead ended up with something completely unexpected and terrifying, with the living. Since the day I was born, it felt like my fate was sealed. I was abandoned at an orphanage when I was just 3 months old and lived there until I turned 18. The orphanage was an old monastery, built not long after the first Christian settlers arrived in America from Europe. I never dug too deep into the history of the place, mainly because I lived there and had no other choice. It's one thing to go searching for ghost stories in far-off places. It's a whole different thing to look for them in your own home. Growing up in that monastery wasn't awful. The nuns always took good care of us, but there was always a lot of weird stuff happening. The older kids were always whispering stories about cults and sects that supposedly passed through there. There was even a tale that back in 1870, there had been a big massacre, and since then, the monastery had been abandoned periodically due to strange occurrences. I grew up in the midst of all this, so the paranormal wasn't just familiar to me, it terrified me, and, at the same time, sparked a deep respect within me. When I became a teenager and was better able to handle these stories, I started trying to learn more. One night, I was in the bathroom when, in a split second, I saw the wall fill with blood. It started and ended so quickly that I still can't explain or justify what I saw. All I know is that it was real. That experience deepened my need to understand the unexplainable. So when I finally left the monastery at 18, I began exploring some of the places across the United States that were said to be haunted. The story I'm about to tell you happened on Phantom Canyon Road in the mountains of Colorado, not too far from where I was born. One of the reasons people say this area is haunted is due to the high levels of quartzite. I'm not sure what the scientific explanation for this is, or if there even is one. But the paranormal community believes that quartzite holds a lot of paranormal energy, and so, supposedly, places built over large veins of quartzite are known to experience more paranormal activity than usual. Besides this factor, before heading to this place, I did some research, and the history of this area is, to say the least, fascinating. Phantom Canyon Road is a road that used to be a railroad system back in the 1800s, used to transport passengers and gold from Canyon City to Victor, Colorado. And there's a reason locals call this road Phantom Canyon Road. In the 1890s, passengers on the train passing through this canyon spotted a man walking along the tracks, dressed in prison clothes. This man supposedly looked like someone who had been executed at the Colorado State Penitentiary in Canyon City just a few days before he started being seen. Many of those who ended up in this penitentiary or in the Cripple Creek jail were often miners working in this area, who found themselves imprisoned for various reasons, like theft, public intoxication, disturbances, or even murder. But there were also many who were incarcerated due to the violence that erupted after a huge labor strike between the miners and the mine owners. These mining companies in the region wanted to increase the workday from 8 to 10 hours without raising wages. Understandably, the miners didn't stay quiet or resign themselves to this, and many walked off the job, leading to the closure of several mines. That's when the companies, not caring about their employees, started hiring non-union workers to keep the mines running. And that's when everything went off the rails and all hell broke loose. There were shootouts, train derailments, mines that were intentionally collapsed with people inside, and at one point, 15 people were killed when an elevator cable in one of the mines was sabotaged, causing all the miners to fall to their deaths. The miners even bombed a train station, killing 13 more non-union workers. Because of all these events, it's believed that the entire area between Canyon City, Florence, Victor, and Cripple Creek is extremely haunted. People who come here to camp claim that at night, they see ghostly figures that seem to be prisoners or miners wandering through the woods late at night. I wanted to get to the bottom of this story and see if I could find anything. My plan was simple. I was going to camp alone for a few days in this area and try to capture some activity. I wasn't there to prove anything to anyone, but just to try to understand something that had haunted me since childhood. I had been on the road for a while, trying to reach a specific area I had marked on the map. It was a more southern region with huge tunnels, and supposedly it was one of the spots with the highest recorded paranormal activity. However, the road I was on was dirt, with some pretty challenging spots, and darkness started to fall. On top of that, it was winding, with very little visibility and full of cliffs. If I took a wrong step while driving, I could easily fall off one of them. Another thing I kept in mind, which is crucial for anyone who decides to explore this region, is that we're in full-on mountain lion, bear, and lynx territory. If you ever come to this part of the country, you should be very careful when crossing the roads, especially at night, and especially if you're alone, like I was. It's always good to have a plan in case things go wrong, and it's always very important to be properly protected. Because of that, I didn't want to set up camp when it was already pitch dark, so I decided to look for the best place to camp in the area I was in. Not even 5 minutes later, I found a small clearing between two cliffs, with a stream in the middle, and decided I'd stay there. By this point, I started feeling slightly uneasy. Not that I was outright terrified. Growing up in a medieval monastery gives you a certain emotional resilience, but overall, I felt uncomfortable. I had been driving for 4 hours on that road, and even though it's a spot with some tourism and photographers, I hadn't come across a single car. However, during a brief stop to eat, I came across a wooden sign that said, "Be aware, the area is beautiful and will leave you in awe, but the longer you stay here, the more likely you are to encounter things you can't fully understand." I thought it was just a joke, someone trying to scare whoever passed by. But after an hour of being camped out, with only the sounds of the forest around me, those words started echoing in my mind. To calm myself down, I decided to take out my camera and explore a bit. I know it's weird, but walking, especially in the dark, has always comforted me. After all, that's what I was there for, and I had already been to much scarier places. In reality, despite being cautious, my biggest fear was encountering a mountain lion, not really a ghost. But if I had known there was a third option, like completely insane people and killers, I wouldn't have even started this adventure. So, I had been walking for a while when, in the distance, I heard a noise. And when I say in the distance, I mean really far away, probably on the mountain opposite the one I was on. I tried to pinpoint where the sound was coming from, and that's when, rounding a bend in the road that gave me a view of that mountain, I saw a light flickering intermittently. At first, the light was pointing upward, but suddenly it turned in my direction, like it had spotted me. I panicked and instinctively turned off my own light. It really felt like whoever was on that mountain had seen me directly. I decided to ignore the situation. After all, there was no reason to panic. Whoever saw me could have been just as scared of me as I was of them. They could be other nature lovers or campers, just like me, or maybe even someone else searching for paranormal activity. But even so, I stayed there for a while, watching the light, and I began to notice that it was moving pretty fast. It couldn't be a car. Not even a jeep could cross that mountain terrain without a road, and I knew the road didn't go through there. What was even stranger was that the light wasn't moving horizontally, as you'd expect if someone was crossing the mountain, but vertically, as if it was descending through the vegetation. Was it heading toward me? The idea horrified me, so I decided to quickly head back to the tent and the car. As I walked at a fast pace, I realized that the light could be someone running. Maybe it was another camper out for a night run, as crazy as that might sound. Who in their right mind would go for a night run in a mountain lion hunting ground? But truth be told, I was out there too. I wasn't running, and I had taken the necessary precautions. But even so, all sorts of scenarios ran through my mind during that walk. I finally reached the tent and the car, feeling a bit relieved. I started to think I'd overreacted, and that there was no reason to be so startled. However, I've always lived by the motto, better safe than sorry, and I'm glad I did. I had been in the tent for about 30 to 45 minutes when I thought I heard a noise nearby. I became alert, trying to catch any other sound, but I didn't hear anything else, and was about to give up when I heard a strange noise again. Could those be footsteps? The idea terrified me, and confirmed that what I had seen was, in fact, a person. Another thing that left me petrified was the thought that someone had moved so quickly across the mountain and followed me all the way here. What was their motive? Or was it something paranormal? My mind was racing inside the tent, and I felt that if someone intended to harm me, the tent offered no protection whatsoever. I needed to know what I was dealing with. I shouted that I was armed and had no problem using the weapon while unzipping the tent. That's when the most unexpected and chilling thing happened. Right on the edge of the light, near some trees, stood a man, completely naked except for a loincloth. In his hand, he held a massive axe, and as soon as he saw me, he let out a terrifying scream. I don't know if I screamed too, or if I just stifled it inside me. I didn't have time to think. My instincts just kicked in. I dropped everything and ran straight for the car. I jumped in, locked the doors, and started backing up. That's when I saw him running toward me, and then he slammed the axe right into the front of the car. I got out of there as fast as I could, and as soon as I had cell service, I reported everything to the police. The police searched that mountain for 2 days, but didn't find any trace of the man, except for the mark left on my car. Since then, I've heard stories from other people who've had bizarre experiences in that area. Some report seeing a giant naked man who matches my description. Others have heard maniacal screams in the middle of the forest. To this day, I don't know what he wanted, probably to kill me, but this experience shook me to my core. I haven't gone camping in such remote areas since then. Everything I experienced on Phantom Canyon Road reminds me of something one of the nuns who took care of me used to say when I was scared of ghosts. Don't be afraid of the dead, be afraid of the living.